differences in opinion, differences in matters of judgment. Now, of course, depending on which side of that argument you're on, you might say, no, because what I believe is a doctrinal issue. Well, I'm sure that's the way I would probably say it too. So let's go ahead and start with a word of prayer, and then we'll get started with our class. Father, thank you so much for the incredible privilege that you gave us today to come together as a family. And Father, as your family, to see members that we haven't seen for a long time, and boy, does that just thrill our hearts. It reminds us, Father, that there's going to come a day where you're going to have a great family reunion once again up in heaven. And then all the time will just be a time of wonderful and sweet fellowship and love and just getting caught up, I guess, if that even matters at that point. But Father, it's great to see a lot of folks we hadn't seen for a while, but then it was also great to see a number of people that this was their first time with us. Father, I pray that they found us to be a friendly and loving group of people, that they heard your people singing their hearts out, praying their hearts out, preaching their hearts out. Father, that they would say, this is the sort of place that I'm looking for. Father, thank you so much for giving us the privilege of making an impact in this world for you. Not for our sake, Father, but for yours. Now, Father, be with us during this class and during our time together so that, Father, the things we say might be in keeping with your word. And, Father, help that always be the desire for us to have is, what does your word say? Thank you, Father, for your Son once again. And we offer this prayer in our lives to you in his name. Okay. Today's the last in the series on the war question. That's the way this is usually teed up. They say it's called the war question. And we saw in our first lesson the views that some Christians hold regarding war to what's called the pacifist view of war. Now, understand, as I said from the very first, and I've tried to say in each class since that time, is that the thing is that these are all scriptures, or the things that we're looking at are all views that are held by brethren, and I'm not giving this so that you can make the right decision. I'm giving you so that you'll have enough information so that you believe you can make the best decision for you. And so we talked about the pacifist view. Then we talked about the just war view. If it's a just war, then God has no problem with us going and doing such things like they do in warfare. Well, last week we talked about holy war. If it's a holy war where we are actually instruments in the hands of God, weapons that he can use against the enemies, that we can do that. And in each of these questions, we looked and saw that there is Bible warrant for every single one of these views. Well, today, as you can see, what we're going to be talking about is arguments for and against non-resistance. Okay, now, reading that paragraph at the top. There are 4 views regarding the above stated topic. So far, we have seen 3 of them, and I just mentioned those. The 4th and final perspective that is espoused by some is called non-resistance. This view says Christians may participate in war, just as long as it's a just war, but only as non-combatants. Non-combatants. Then that way you might be able to serve as a medic or a chaplain or drive a supply truck or some role where you will not be killing somebody. As long as you're not killing somebody, then you can be supportive of that war. Any role which does not directly involve picking up a gun or shooting someone or firing off a missile and blowing them up is something that you can do. So that's the final view here. Clearly, this perspective is a compromise between just war and pacifism. You know, it has the pacifistic nature because you do not kill somebody. You do not harm somebody because of directly of what you do. But then also it's a just war because you may participate in it if the war is just. And remember, we saw all the things, the qualities that need to go into deciding if a war is just. So it has all the strengths of these 2 perspectives. And then I'm reading down on your sheet. As in the case of those who hold to a just war perspective, it believes that war should be rare and not entered into lightly. Yet as a just warrior, would also assert that a person and or nation has the right to defend themselves and their family against aggression. In other words, self-defense. It's that they say we're allowed to defend ourselves in that regards. And then number two, like the pacifist, however, they believe this defense needs to be moderated by restraint. In this regards, they do not believe they have the right to take another person's life. So you can defend yourself, but not kill anyone. And then number three, therefore, its greatest strength of this non-resistance view, its greatest strength is that it allows the individual to support their beliefs by using the arguments of each of these two disparate perspectives in order to justify their own beliefs and actions. And so we've got the best of both worlds, at least of those two different views. Now, what thoughts or questions or comments do you have about any of the stuff that we just got through saying? I mean, you might say, well, I disagree, or you might say, I agree. If you say that, understand, I will then say, why do you disagree? Why do you agree? Whichever way you go, I'll ask you to support your answer. Now, I'm not saying that so that you guys say, I'm going to sit on my hands and keep my mouth shut so he doesn't say anything to me.
I want to ask a question. Now, if I choose either of the different thoughts that you just mentioned, would I be held accountable for it spiritually?
The question that was asked was, if I choose to follow any of these various views that we're talking about here, will I be held accountable for it spiritually? And the answer is, and I almost want to say obviously, yes. We're going to be held accountable for everything that we do. According to 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verse 10, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ that we may give an account for the deeds that we have done in the body, whether good or bad. So yes, we will be held accountable for our decisions. That's why I'm trying to arm you with information. You know, my job, the mandate that God has given to me, this isn't something that the elders tell me I need to do. This is what God tells me I need to do. In Ephesians chapter 4, in verses 11 and 12, Paul writes and says, God gave some as apostles and some as prophets. They're still with us, right here. He says, and some as evangelists, and some as pastors and teachers. Now, why did God give them? For the equipping of the saints, for the work of service, to the building up of the body of Christ. My job is to equip you so that you can be the most effective Christian that you can be, and that God can use you in a tremendous way in His service. And so that's my role here, is to equip you. So I'm giving you information. I'm building you up with the Word of God, and now then you take that information and digest it. And that doesn't mean this is the last time. If you have any questions, you know, after this class or some other time, you could always give me a call, send me a text, or talk to me here and say, Rick, I've got a question. What about, and that's always fine too. You know, 24/7 is, it was funny because when I used to be in medicine, back in the old days, they used to have beepers. Does anybody remember beepers? I mean, now, you know, everybody's got a cell phone, but back in those days, it was a beeper. And I thought, when I was going through schooling, I thought, you know, one of those days, I'm going to have one of those cool little beepers. Boy, that was a stupid thought. That thing's a leash. You couldn't get away from it. You know, when I was on call, it was 24/7. Well, I did not change that. Now I tell people, I get to sleep when my boss sleeps. And Jesus doesn't sleep, brethren, so that's not that way. So what other questions, Gerald?
Yeah, you know, there's scripture that says, you know, before you try to move plank out of someone else's eye, you know, consider the mold in your own eye.
Correct.
You know, in Old Testament time, when God sent people to war, it was because He wanted to eliminate the sin in that particular area where he was sinning. Now, I said that to say this. You know, today we can volunteer to go to service.
Yes.
To the military.
Correct.
We go to a country because that government is oppressive people there, you know, making slaves out of women and that sort of thing like that. And so this is why we're there.
We said that Gulf War I, when Saddam Hussein crossed the border into Kuwait and took over the oil fields and all that stuff, that was called, we called that, when I say we, this nation said, that is a just war. We are going to drive them out, and that's what we did. The reason we had that coalition is, I mean, it was made up of Arab nations also, because we did not say, we said that we will not go past the borders of Kuwait. We will not drive all the way into Baghdad and drive out Saddam Hussein, but we will get them out of Kuwait. And so that was a just war.
Right, now, consider, that being said, that was considered a just war.
Correct.
But then what about all the infractions that are going on in our own country? How can we remove that infraction if we can't remove our own?
Let me ask if you're saying this, Gerald. Does that mean that we should never seek to intervene in anyone else's life until our lives are perfect?
No, not at all, not at all. But I can't overlook my sin to try to fix somebody else.
Well, that's certainly true. Jump into this conversation, folks. We're having it out loud so that all of us, what are your thoughts regarding what Gerald and I are talking about?
What defines a just war?
Those various qualities that I had on that day, that sheet, there was a whole listing of just things. It was like if there's a good reason to accomplish this particular thing that will spare lives, and it's to eliminate evil, and there was a number of various characteristics or qualities that I gave that define what makes up a just war. And all these things that I've handed out to you, I've got them in my hard drive. So if you want a copy of any of those things, just write down a note, your name, and you want the sheets that dealt with these particular things. And what I'll do is, if you want that, this one I gave you my notes. This is usually the sort of thing that I would not give you. Usually I give you the big, bold, the broad things. I'd give you like numbers 1 and 2 and letter A, B, and C. I do those, but then I wouldn't give you the 1, 2, 3s. What I would give you, though, is if you're missing one of those things and you'd like to see something regarding pacifism, just war, holy war, then I would give you my notes that contain all that stuff, too. So don't think, what do I want with a sheet of paper that doesn't tell me what I need to know? You're just talking to two preachers here, brother. There's no way you're going to outdo us. Oh, this is great. I love the idea.
Everybody would stand up and almost salute the plant manager. And when I got ready to retire, oh, that's the plant manager. I can do the job. And there was a time when the country said, we have an issue. Let's rally around it. You don't even disagree with it. We're going hook, line, and sinker. We're going. The songs, all of that was leading us to just usher in and rally around the support and cause of the nation. Vietnam said, not so much. Post-Vietnam. So things have changed as to what is just and unjust, whether we have WMDs, whether or not we have other issues or concerns. And so what I'm saying, if we try to really scrutinize everything, there will be individuals that will never go.
Exactly right. And I mentioned, I think it was at the beginning of last Sunday's lesson. It might have been the Sunday before, but I said there was a time up until the 1950s where we were just like what you said. I mean, there might be some fringe people out there, on the edges, but for the most part, if this country believed that certain things were absolutely right and certain things were absolutely wrong, well, we live in a day and age where they're no longer moral absolutes. Like you might say, well, that's absolutely wrong for you, but it's okay for me. So does the fact that you think it's wrong make it wrong? The fact that I think something's right, make it right? And so you're absolutely correct. And so today, defining terms of what's just or even perhaps what's holy, because some people might say, well, if it's holy, if it's in the Bible, really? Well, I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Buddhist, or I'm an atheist. Does that mean that I don't get my own holy war? So good point, Larry. Really good point.
Rick. Now,
Could you guys sit closer together?
now, saying all what was said, you know, when your message this morning was about what had some parts of liberty in it, you know, where, you know, Christian liberty is when we abide by the law or, you know, what is the standard for Christian liberty?
Exactly.
And how would you tie that into our decision to go to war or not go to war, you know, on those terms?
In this regards, Gerald, what I would do is just what I said. I'm not keeping anything back when I'm preaching. You know how it is. You just tell them this is what I believe is the right thing to say. And in so saying that, I'm not going, since this is a matter, I believe, whether or not you should go. I mean, there's no command. We do not have a command telling us we should go to war, except for a war against Satan. You know, that's a holy war in which we are called to be involved. But should I go to some carnal, secular type war? Well, that's somebody's opinion. And what I would do is I would share with them all this information that I've given. And I'd say, now you are going to one day stand before God on the basis of the decisions you make. But at least now you understand the various options that you have available to you. Yes, sir.
Number 2 sounds like rules of engagement. I never did like rules of engagement where you could only return fire when you were fired upon, because those guys are out there and they're out there to get you.
Yeah. They don't have our rules of engagement. That's not fair.
It's not fair. Also, we went many times in Afghanistan with planes laden with bombs, and we came back with them because we were too concerned about civilian casualties when we knew those guys embedded themselves around civilians. And man, you just can't really fight like that. I knew a personal story from years ago about this guy whose uncle was in World War II. And they got news that the war was over and they were to return back to the base. They had their bombs. And those guys went ahead and they dropped those bombs. They wanted to kill more of the people, even though they knew that that was wrong. In a case like that, I would say they shouldn't do that. That was inhumane.
Yeah, I'd say they're a war criminal
Yeah.
because they did that.
Well, back then, we didn't have.
Well, Nuremberg
There were some, yeah.
had the various generals and political figures in the Third Reich that were on trial for things that they had done wrong. You know, obviously the killing of the Jews and the Nazi death camps and all those sorts of things. But there were other things where they took people out of the Warsaw ghettos and some of the other ghettos, and they would just take them out into the woods and just mow them all down with machine guns, automatic weapons, and then, you know, dig a big old ditch and throw them bodies in and cover it back up, and that's it. And so, but what was their response was this: we were obeying our leaders. We were obeying what we had been commanded to do. Now, the response that the justices gave, both the Americans and the British were the main ones that were the prosecuting attorneys. They said it wasn't that you were violating German law if you would disobey, or by doing that, if you obeyed German law, you were not obedient to moral law. And so that's what they did, is they said there is a higher moral law that you were violating. Like the guys in the plane that went ahead and dropped the bombs and things of that nature. They might say, well, you know, we did, our thing was garbled or something. Well, they'll tell lies. But if we violate moral law, it doesn't matter if somebody tells us to do it. I mean, even today, in today's military, which Gerald's right, it's all volunteer army today. But if somebody tells you to do something that is immoral, the My Lai massacre, remember that? Sergeant, what was his name? Okay, Lieutenant Calley. Calley was his name. He's the one that they went into a village of Vietnamese people and killed them. All of them. They didn't know if they were Viet Cong. Maybe they thought they were sympathizers or what the thing was. You know, and so he used all that. Well, bad people. That was a war crime. And it's a terrible war. I mean, war's hell anyhow. Who was it that said that? I still think it was Stonewall Jackson, but somebody else might tell me better. But at any rate, yes, sir, Larry?
I'm going to change the subject of countries.
Sure.
To war with other evil countries.
Joey, can you do this one too? Or Chris? Let Chris do it. He knows where it's at. Go ahead.
Okay. What I'm seeing today, and we've discussed it in the past, a war against the law-abiding citizens, against police. There's a war going on, and a lot of people don't realize it. But the leaders, tell them, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. Yet the ones who are committing the crimes are not subject to being prosecuted. And I consider that a war against decent, law-abiding citizens. And it's escalating so bad that, and I'm surprised that people still want to join law enforcement. Not as much as before, but and a lot of them are leaving the job because of being ambushed and so forth, and their families are worried about it, so they quit. You have to stand up against evil, and I consider that law enforcement is basically doing that. There are some bad apples there. There always is.
Yeah.
Anything, any job you go to. But my thoughts are we have to stay firm and stick to it to knock those evil ones out of the limelight and put them in the proper place, and that is jail. And a lot of them aren't being prosecuted because of the government, the leaders in those areas.
Yeah.
And we have to pray that our country will get back on track and get back to the Constitution, and law-abiding citizens can be, everybody's buying guns now. People who never thought they'd ever own a gun are buying guns.
There you go.
Because people are being killed for no reason. So I just pray that we'll come to a point where we can get back to a normal, and what I call normal is law-abiding
Sure.
country.
Yeah. Your prayer from your lips to God's ear, I hope. In Romans 13, we've heard this before. Beginning in the first verse, it says, "Let every person be in subjection to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those which exist are established by God. Therefore, he who resists authority has opposed the ordinance of God, and they who have opposed will receive condemnation upon themselves. For rulers are not a cause of fear for good behavior, but for evil. Do you want to have no fear of authority? Then do what's good, and you will have praise from the same. For it," that's the governing authorities, "it is a minister of God to you for good. But if you do what is evil, be afraid, for it does not bear the sword for nothing. For it is a minister of God, an avenger who brings wrath upon the one who practices evil." I think the thing, Larry, that what you're talking about is we have laws in place that are not being upheld. I mean, the laws are, it's like, how many of us would go to the Houston Zoo if they said, today is no cage day. We're opening up all the cages and letting all the animals run free so that you get the chance to see all the animals in their wild, natural state. Chris Lyons raises his hand. Well, if I had a last name like yours, I'd probably do it too. You're a king of the beast, brother. But the thing is that those bars are there to protect us. That's the whole idea, is the guards are there to keep us safe. But if the people who are supposed to be the zookeepers are not making sure that the people who are walking around are safe, then we're living in, open door day at the zoo. And that's a sad thing. The thing is the people who are in office, what we have to recognize is that, as somebody said a long time ago, people get the government they deserve. It's because we voted for them. Now you might say, I didn't vote for any of those clowns. Doesn't matter. Our system is that this is the way that it works. And so we need to do all that we can to protect ourselves. But recognize, brethren, this is never going to be a perfect system here. This is not where we're intended to live. Remember my statement to you a couple weeks ago is, you're a undocumented alien here. This world is not your home. In Philippians chapter 3 and verse 20, it says, for our citizenship is where? In heaven, from which we eagerly await a Savior. So we're here, it's kind of like, if you've ever been to a foreign country, you know that there are things that, well, this is weird, or they drive on the wrong side, or all these various things that make it strange, that make it odd for you. Well, living in this world should be strange and odd for us as Christians, because they think things are important that you and I say, that's not right. That's not good. Gerald? I'm sorry, what, David?
Getting stranger every day.
And